Welcome to Legal Matters. I'm Sarah. Before we begin, please remember, the information in this program is for general educational purposes only. It does not constitute legal advice, and it may not apply to your specific situation. If you have questions about defamation or any legal matter, you should consult a qualified attorney in California for guidance based on your individual circumstances. Today, we're tackling a topic that affects both individuals and businesses, defamation, and we'll be focusing on how it works under California law. What does it really mean when someone damages your reputation with false statements? And what does California law actually require you to prove? Joining me to unpack it all is Professor James Whitfield. Professor, great to have you back on the show.
Thanks, Sarah. It's always good to be here. Defamation is one of those topics that everyone's heard of, but few people really understand how it works, especially here in California, where the law has some unique rules and standards.
Let's start simple, Professor. What exactly is defamation under California law?
In California, defamation means making a false statement of fact that harms someone's reputation. If it's written or posted online, it's called libel. If it's spoken, it's called slander. Now, to win a defamation case in California, a person, called the plaintiff, has to prove 5 things. First, that the defendant made a statement about the plaintiff. Second, that the statement was published, meaning it was shared with at least one other person. Third, that people who heard or read it understood it referred to the plaintiff. Fourth, that the statement was false. And fifth, that it caused harm, such as damage to reputation, emotional distress, or financial loss. If the person suing is a public figure, there's an extra step. Under California law, they must also prove actual malice, meaning the speaker knew the statement was false or acted with reckless disregard for the truth.
So it's not enough that someone says something mean. It has to be false, published, and damaging, right?
Exactly. California law protects opinions and true statements, even if they're unpleasant.
We often hear about defamation per se and defamation per quod. What's the difference under California law?
Good question. In California, defamation per se means the words are clearly harmful on their face. For example, accusing someone of a crime, saying they're unfit for their profession, or claiming they have a contagious disease. In those cases, the law assumes harm. You don't have to prove actual damage. But defamation per quod is different. It's only defamatory once you know extra facts or context. For example, saying he spent last night at 22 Maple Street might sound harmless, but if that address is known as an illegal gambling house, then with that extra context, it becomes defamatory. In per quod cases, California law requires proof of actual harm, such as lost income, reputational injury, or emotional distress.
So per se is automatically harmful, while per quod needs more context and proof of damage.
That's right, and California courts take that distinction seriously.
Let's say someone wins a defamation case in California. What kinds of damages can they receive?
They can receive several types of damages under California law. First, actual damages for real measurable losses like lost business, income, or emotional distress. Second, in per se cases, they can receive presumed damages, even without direct proof of loss, because the harm is obvious. And third, if the defendant acted maliciously, meaning they knew the statement was false or intended to harm, the court can award punitive damages to punish that conduct. Now, California law also recognizes certain privileges that protect specific kinds of speech. For example, fair and accurate reports of court or government proceedings are protected under the fair reporting privilege. There's also a common interest privilege, which covers good faith communications between people who share a mutual concern. For instance, coworkers discussing workplace safety or parents discussing school matters. But if someone abuses those privileges by acting maliciously or spreading falsehoods recklessly, those protections no longer apply.
So the law in California tries to strike a balance between free speech and fairness.
Exactly. That balance is at the heart of defamation law here.
Let's talk about one of the biggest defenses, the truth defense. How does that work under California law?
It's very simple, but very powerful. Truth is an absolute defense to defamation in California. If the statement someone made about you is true, or even substantially true, it cannot be considered defamatory, no matter how embarrassing or harmful it might be. For example, if a local newspaper reports that a restaurant was fined by the health department, and that's true, it's not defamation, even if the report hurts the restaurant's reputation.
You said substantially true. What does that mean?
It means the main point, or what courts call the gist or sting of the statement, is accurate, even if some small details are off. For instance, if a report says someone stole $900 when it was actually $850, the main idea that theft occurred is still true.
And who has to prove what in California cases?
It depends on the situation. In most private person cases, the defendant has to show the statement was true. But if the case involves a public figure or a matter of public concern, the plaintiff must prove the statement was false. That rule comes from the U.S. Supreme Court case, Philadelphia Newspapers versus Heps, and California follows it closely.
Let's shift gears to something that affects businesses, trade libel. How does that fit under California law?
Under California law, trade libel, or sometimes called commercial disparagement, happens when someone makes a false statement about a company's product or service, and that statement causes financial harm. Think of it as defamation for businesses. It doesn't attack a person's reputation. It attacks the quality of a product or the integrity of a service. To prove trade libel in California, a business has to show several things. First, that someone made a false statement about their product or service. Second, that the statement was shared with others. Third, that it was false. Fourth, that the person who made it knew it was false or acted with reckless disregard for the truth. Fifth, that people relied on the false statement. For example, customers stopped buying. Sixth, that the business lost money because of it. And finally, that the statement was a substantial factor in causing that loss.
That sounds like a lot to prove.
It is. California courts have said trade libel is a difficult claim because the business must show specific financial losses, not just a general drop in sales.
What about opinions like product reviews?
Good question. Under California's First Amendment protections, opinions are generally protected. If someone says, "I think their coffee tastes bad," that's opinion. But if they say their coffee is contaminated and that's false, then it could be trade libel. The key is whether the statement can be proven true or false.
Professor, this has been a lot to take in. What's the big takeaway for our California listeners?
I'd say two main things. First, words have real power. Whether you're posting online, writing a review, or talking to someone, make sure what you say is true and fair. And second, if someone spreads lies about you or about your business, California law does give you tools to protect yourself. But you'll need to prove that the statement was false, about you, share with others, and caused harm. In short, under California defamation law, truth and responsibility both matter.
Very well said. Professor Whitfield, thank you for joining us and making California defamation law easier to understand.
My pleasure, Sarah. Always happy to help.
And to our listeners, think before you post, share, or repeat something. Under California law, defamation can cost more than you think. That's all for today's Legal Matters. Stay informed and stay truthful.